All right. This is John Smith. Excuse me a second. Thanks for joining another episode of Punk Rock Politics. So Tara Reade, Joe Biden's former campaign staffer, who I did a video on and showed Jimmy Dore's show, and then expanded upon that and gave my take on the whole matter, and contradicted something that I think Jimmy Dore said. But Jimmy Dore has been right on a lot of things about this campaign, so I'm not gonna bash him or anything like that, and I never intended to. I just critiqued something he said briefly, but I was a little overwhelmed by the news. So this is from Current Affairs, the magazine for moms. So it says, anyway, evaluating Tara Reade's allegation against Joe Biden. So I showed the testimony from Alexandra Tara Reade on a previous video, titled something about Biden's accuser and all that stuff of sexual assault, and shared it as much as I could. I haven't shared it recently, but it's got a decent amount of views for a new channel. So I hope you'll check that video out and share it. In fact, I'm going to put the link at the bottom of the description along with this article. Is there any good reason to ignore Joe Biden's accuser? Not from what we know so far. This is by Nathan J. Robinson. It was filed April 10th, 2020, in 2020 election. This is a Current Affairs web exclusive. Content warning, sexual assault. The recent allegations, they shouldn't do that. This is important to who we vote for, and I'm sorry if you were a victim of sexual assault or anything like that, but that doesn't mean that people should have a warning as to not read something, and it might trigger people not to have important information about who will be the president of their country or any politician. So I don't know if I like these warnings. I think that they might be an affront to the dissemination of important information. I understand the intent, but I think it's dangerous to actual news, education, the spread of information. Again, that's vitally important to democracy. Anyway, the recent allegation that Joe Biden once sexually assaulted one of his Senate staffers has not gotten as much attention as one might expect given the seriousness of the crime. The staffer, Tara Reade, has described the assault in vivid and disturbing detail. Her allegation is credible enough to have received an in-depth article in Newsweek, but so far has gone completely unmentioned by the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, and MSNBC. And when Biden has done interviews, he hasn't even been asked about Reade's claim. Reason and The Guardian have published articles questioning the media's silence. Prominent champions of the Me Too movement, including many who loudly defend Christine Blasey Ford when she went public about being sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh during high school, have been noticeably silent about defending Reade, especially Alyssa Milano. So blast Alyssa Milano on Twitter, share my video with her, and ask her what she thinks about it. Indefensible. Reade herself says she has been trying for months to get journalists and activists to pay attention to her story, but nobody has been interested in listening. According to a report by The Intercept, in January of this year, Reade approached Time's Up, a project of the National Women's Law Center designed to provide legal and public relations assistance to sexually abused women. Time's Up declined to help Reade, and as Time's Up told The Intercept, this was not because it doubted her veracity, but because Reade was accusing Biden in particular, and the political nature of the accusation could jeopardize Time's Up nonprofit status. Nonsense. Notably, the PR firm that Time's Up uses to help publicize women's stories, SKDK Knickerbocker, or SKD Knickerbocker, is run by Anita Dunn, a senior advisor to Joe Biden. What a shock that they told her to go chuck rocks. Now, before we engage in any speculation on the reasons for the quiet response to Reade, let us just note something that is indisputably true. If Tara Reade's allegations were to be widely publicized, Joe Biden might be significantly damaged politically. And given the current state of the Democratic Party, in which Biden is the only candidate still campaigning, a scandal like this could throw the Democratic Party into utter chaos. You can still vote for Bernie Sanders. He only suspended his campaign. You can still vote for him. He's going to be on all the ballots. Just keep that in mind. With Biden, the presumptive nominee, which is why it's incredible he must have known about this to have suspended his campaign and not hit Joe Biden even harder and demanded that he can do the 12th Democratic debate that was agreed upon by all candidates and the DNC, and that Biden is saying he's not going to do. Unbelievable. With Biden the presumptive nominee, if something were to undermine Joe Biden, it would therefore hurt the Democratic Party's prospect of defeating Donald Trump. Unless you voted for Bernie Sanders, it would therefore be who would crush Donald Trump and has been slated to crush Donald Trump for 5 years now. In every poll, and recent polling has him beating him in 45 of the 50 states, and sometimes as high as 20 points, 11 points in numerous states, beating him significantly for 5 years of consistent polling data. That's what it led up to, him beating him that badly recently. Anyway. It would therefore be quite understandable for there to be many in the party who want to do everything possible to keep Biden from being damaged in order to preserve their chances against Trump. If Biden went down in flames, the only plausible alternative, running Bernie Sanders, who is still on the ballot despite having suspended his campaign, is for many completely unthinkable. Senior figures in the party have made it clear before that they see Bernie Sanders as an existential threat to the party, instead of somebody who brings in non-voters, independents, and has Republicans vote for president for somebody like Bernie Sanders, where he got 20% of the vote locked in from Republicans in Vermont for years now. Unbelievable. In fact, Bernie Sanders was one of the first elected House representatives or senators in the state, because it had been run by Republicans for a long, long time, like 130 years or something crazy. So that shows his appeal. It's a lie. He helps the down ballot ticket for Democrats. They thus have a strong incentive to do whatever it takes to ensure Biden is in fact nominated. Unbelievable. Bunch of lies and manufacturing consent in the mainstream media, who is, the corporate wing, the elite wing for both parties. MSNBC and CNN, ABC, Disney, NBC, CBS, most often for the Democratic Party, whatever the DNC says, the leaders, the elites in the DNC. I do not allege here that senior Democrats would deliberately bury or ignore a serious accusation of sexual assault against their favored candidate in order to make sure Joe Biden successfully clinched the nomination against Bernie Sanders. This would be monstrous. I do note, however, as a matter of pure fact, that at this stage in the primary, those who see Biden as the nominee and Sanders as disastrous unthinkable have a strong incentive to ignore such an accusation. I am sure they are good people who will resist being influenced by this incentive. Surely they care about truth and morality more than Biden's career, but the existence of the incentive to ignore it is indisputable. If Democrats and large parts of the mainstream press are not ignoring Reade's accusation because it is politically inconvenient, why are they ignoring it? One quite obvious factor is coronavirus. The global pandemic has bumped all of the news to the back pages for the moment, and things that would be incredibly significant in ordinary times are now being set aside. But Reade's accusation is not even on the back pages. A major party presidential candidate being accused of having committed a heinous sex crime against an employer is a major news story. If it's true, Joe Biden should not be the Democratic nominee. If it's true, it is going to have significant ramifications for the November election. Donald Trump is politically savvy enough not to bring it up, while Democrats could still replace Biden, but you bet he will in the general election. That's right. And like Jimmy Dore's been saying, and others. And the November election is going to affect the future of our democracy. So this story is important no matter what way you look at it. The main defense for not paying attention to Tara Reade then is that she is not credible, which means that she is either a malicious liar or completely delusional. Anyone who has listened to Reade's interview with Katie Halper, which I cover in my video about Joe Biden's sexual accuser, Tara Reade, so anyone who has listened to Reade's interview with Katie Halper, and I encourage everyone who could stomach it to do so, I encourage everyone to do so. Get over it. It's important. Unless it's going to cause you to kill yourself or something. And I encourage everyone who could stomach it to do so. But you should know about it. Read about it if you can't stomach listening to the interview. She's either the best actor in the world or totally telling the truth. And I don't think she's the best actress in the world. Okay. Anyone who has listened to Reade's interview with Katie Halper knows that if this were the case, Reade would have to be very malicious or very delusional. Her story is so detailed and emotional that it is extremely hard listening to her tell it to believe that she's not telling the truth. You know what? Can I play this without it being a whole thing? Okay, I'm going to stop reading the article and actually play you this Alexandra Tara Reade and what she has, or Tara, also known as Tara Reade, what she has to say about Joe Biden. I'm going to play it as long as I can, and then I'm going to get back to the article, and then wrap up my early videos for today. I'm going to try to do some videos later tonight or tomorrow morning or tomorrow night. We'll see what happens depending on what I got going on. There's so much news to cover. I can't wait to get into how the DNC wants Andrew Cuomo to be their nominee, which is he's an enemy of progressives and logical government and government that helps the people. So we're going to get into that in the next video. But this is really important. So let's listen to... Oh, this is freezing. Well, this isn't a Katie Halper's podcast, and Tara Reade here, Joe Biden's sexual assault accuser.
Hello and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. On today's episode, I speak to Tara Reade, a California-based victims' rights advocate and activist. Last spring, after Nevada politician Lucy Flores shared that Biden had touched her inappropriately, Tara was one of 7 women who came forward to accuse Joe Biden of similar misbehavior. At the time, she told a local reporter that when she worked as a staff assistant for Joe Biden's Senate office in the early 90s, he would put his hands on her shoulder, run his fingers up and down her neck. Almost immediately after sharing her own story, Tara was doxxed and smeared. There was more to Tara's story than she had revealed, but she felt too vulnerable to tell it. Then in January, she approached Time's Up, the nonprofit organization which helps women share their Me Too stories. As we now know from a March 24th Ryan Grimm article at The Intercept, Time's Up told Tara they couldn't help her because funding a Me Too allegation against Joe Biden could threaten their tax-exempt status. As Grimm also points out, the public relations firm that works on behalf of the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund is SKD Knickerbocker, whose managing director, Anita Dunn, is the top advisor to Biden's presidential campaign. Tara finally tells her story for the first time on this interview. I spoke to her this week, and I want to warn listeners that Tara describes an alleged sexual assault. There were no witnesses, but her close friend and her brother, both of whom I spoke to, remember Tara telling them about the incident at the time. You will hear a few beeps during the episode. That's where I beeped out the name of one of Tara's immediate superiors. So Tara Reade, thank you so much for talking to me. Where would you like to start? Where does the story start for you?
Well, the story starts when I went to work for Joe Biden. That was in 92, and so I was hired that fall, the year that Bill Clinton was inaugurated as our president. So I was before that, I was out west, and I had worked on a congressional race. Before I was working in politics, I was an actress and a model, and I had studied classically, and I really loved the arts, and I come from a family of arts and activists and whatnot. And then I got interested in college in political science, and I went and interned for Leon Panetta when he was a congressman, and worked on an animal rights issue that ended up being put into law and signed into law. So it was very exciting, and it was a very successful experience. And then when I applied for Joe Biden's office, I had a phone interview, and then they offered to interview me in person. And so I went out to DC and I interviewed in person. And when I was there, the scheduler interviewed me, and Joe Biden happened to walk breeze past, and he saw me, and she introduced me, and we were in the inner kind of alcove office, and he asked me my name. I told him, and he said, "Oh, that's a good Irish name." And she offered to him, "Hey, she worked as an intern for Panetta," and he's like, "Oh, he's a good guy." And then he looked back and smiled at me and said, "Hire her." And then hey. And the scheduler looked at me and said, "I guess you're hired."
What was the position for?
It was for a staff assistant position. So I, pretty low on the totem pole, but you're able to work through it. So I was working with the intern. So I supervised the intern program and made sure all the mail was distributed where it was supposed to. The interns did that and trained them, and worked for legislative aides. I would help go to a hearing and take notes or write something.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah. So it's sort of like you just did what you had to do. All hands on deck, sort of. Too.
And you were how old at this point?
Mid-20s.
And how long did you work for Biden in total?
9 months.
You would later come forward, after Lucy Flores came forward, about something that happened in 93.
Yes, and I actually did come forward in 93, but not to the press, but I went through protocol and complaint.
What was your complaint about?
Sexual harassment. I did not complain formally about the other piece of what happened that I'll talk about in a few minutes, but I talked about what was witnessed, and the general atmosphere of the office, the way I was treated, because I would see him at meetings and he would basically put his hands on me, put his hands on my shoulder, run his finger on my neck. He was very like handsy with a lot of people, but like with it's like what I had, and I have said this that's in the press before from the last time. It made me feel like an inanimate object. I didn't feel like a person. He didn't like make conversation with me or talk with me or ask me anything relevant. It was just, it was definitely that kind of vibe. So it was uncomfortable. So it was really after that incident when I walked in and everyone was arguing. I was called into the office and I was very nervous because I thought I did something wrong. Like I remember feeling almost sick to my stomach, nervous, like, this was a big deal getting called in rather than them just coming and talking to me. When I walked in, people's voice were raised, they were arguing, and that there was a legislative assistant. She's a senior aide. She worked on women's issues, I believe, among other issues. I know judiciary issues for sure. But anyway, she turned to me and she said, the senator thinks that you have, that you're pretty and that you have nice legs and he wants you to serve drinks at this event, fundraising event. And you don't have to do that, Tara. You don't, that's not part of your job. And then the scheduler came in right after she kind of interrupted her in the middle of what she was saying and then said whatever she said. And I can't remember everything that was exchanged, but basically then everyone kind of looked at me and I just froze because I didn't know what to say to anybody. And it was uncomfortable. And I knew that no matter what I decided to do, I was going to either, make my immediate supervisor very unhappy, or I was going to look bad in the eyes of this person, the legislative, assistant who was sticking up for me, obviously, and didn't think I should be objectified. So it was a strange position to be in, and I just left. I didn't say anything, actually. And I called my mom, and she was very adamant that I document it and file a report. And she said, and her exact words were, and I remember because we got into like a little bit of an argument about it, but she said, you just march in there and you tell them this is sexual harassment and you file a complaint. And I tried to explain to my mother that it wasn't easy. You couldn't just march into Ted Kaufman's office, who was the chief of staff, and that there was a protocol and that there was a way to do that. And my mother was very, she just said, you tend to be a little passive sometimes, sometimes you stick up for yourself, but sometimes, you let people take advantage of you. You need to stand up and you need to address this. So I already kind of had those feelings, but that was that point. I knew I wanted to look at taking some action. So I did a non-formal thing by just going to my supervisor. That's when I was met with some of her attitude about the whole thing. Like, why wasn't I complimented? That people would be flattered to be liked by Joe Biden. And, what basically she was also admonishing me to keep my head down if I wanted to last. She said that a couple of times. And she took me in the hallway a couple of times and just was very, kind of chewed me out a few times. And nothing was in writing. But the time frame for me from this event to when I met him with the gym bag and the incident is compressed for me. And I don't know how much time passed, but I do know a couple of things happened between those two events. One of them that was significant was being told I had to dress differently and that I was too provocative, and that was by the assistant and by the scheduler. And they were finding fault with my work all the time, like every little thing. And it was almost to the point where 3 or 4 times a day, there would be something wrong. And my mother, I would call my mom just one day in tears, and she was like, this is retaliation. They know that you want to file something. You're going through the motions. Because I had gone as far as to talk to Dennis Toner, who was the next person up after. And Dennis Toner then was below Ted Kaufman. And there was just like this protocol you followed. And I eventually did talk to Ted Kaufman and Dennis Turner, and shortly then wasn't even talking to me anymore. It was Dennis Toner that dealt with me. Mm-hmm. Up to this point, working for Biden had been kind of tense. How his public persona is very different than what he's like to work. It's more like working for a corporation. It's very top down, and it's very tense, and he doesn't treat his staff that well. So in my opinion, that was my experience of it. And some other people that were complaining about it and would leave abruptly. In fact, the position that I had, they were having trouble keeping a person in it. So I don't know what that's about, but that's one of the things at the interview they made clear, is that people kept leaving, and then they wanted me to stay and asking if I had plans to stay. And I said yes, that I wanted to make a career on the Hill, and then I'd eventually like to run for office someday. That was and when I came in, it was at this beautiful time. This is before all the scandals, before the impeachment of Clinton. This is when he first was president. I got to go to the inauguration. I got to go to the inaugural balls because I was working for Senator Biden. And it was this magical time, in a sense. I walked the Bridge of Hope, got to meet Maya Angelou, which is one of the highlights of my life. And it was just amazing and wonderful. So I was like a puppy and with enthusiasm, Right. This was a dream job. I was so happy to be there. So I just went in with the attitude of doing everything I could to be, a good employee, to be there. And I was very excited and honored to be there.
And so did you serve drinks at that event?
I did not.
Okay, so okay.
It kind of just went away. Right. I said no, and then when I said no, I sort of got attitude about it, and then I pushed back on another thing that had nothing to do with sexual harassment. I pushed back about the intern program because I was given a stack by Ted Kaufman, the chief of staff, of resumes, and he directed me firmly to hire DuPont employees' children only. Wow. And I pushed back and I said, we need more diversity, and I want to hire some women, and I want to hire from other places. Like, you hired me. And then after this whole conversation, I was like, how did I get hired? I'm not from Delaware. I'm from West Coast, right? So, so he said 50%. So he relented 50%, and it was still just strange. So I'd have these interns that were more diverse and working class, and then I had these really privileged interns. So it was, that kind of stuff was happening. So there was like regular work challenges happening, right?
So how much interacting did you have with Biden?
It's because I was there. I would see him on and off quite a bit, but wouldn't necessarily talk with him. He was always breezing in with his people that would stay around him, usually the upper level staff. And they usually kind of kept right with him. So, but once in a while I would see him, and he would just do that thing that guys do, when they look you up and down and then smile and stuff. It just was obnoxious. I mean, and back then I just accepted it for what it was. When I talked about this discomfort that I had, I was really timid about it. I found myself getting more and more withdrawn and timid about speaking out because of the atmosphere, and because so closed down about hearing about it. She would just be like, one of the things she said to me was, the senator likes you. Most women would really like that attention. She goes, I don't understand your attitude. Like, what is the problem? So it was, I definitely felt, started feeling like I just didn't really belong there. It definitely wasn't a progressive office.
Yeah.
It was definitely not like that then. I don't know what it would be like now, but the incident when I talked about the discomfort, like I said, I was told to just do what I was told. And then it wasn't too long after that called me in and said, I want you to take this to Joe. He wants it. He wants you to bring it. Hurry. And I said, okay. And it was a gym bag. She said, take the gym bag. She called it athletic bag. And, she said he was down towards the Capitol and he'll meet you. And so I went down and I was heading down towards there. And he was at first talking to someone. I could see him at a different distance, and then they went away. And then we were in like the side. It was like the side area. And he was he just said, "Hey, come here, Tara." And then I handed him the thing, and he greeted me. He remembered my name. And then we were alone, and it was the strangest thing. There was no like exchange, really. He just had me up against the wall. And I was wearing like a skirt and, like business skirt, but I wasn't wearing stockings. It was kind of a hot day that day, and I was wearing heels. And I remember my legs had been hurting from the marble, of the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
Like walk. And so I remember that kind of stuff. I remember like that, and it was kind of an unusually warm day. And I remember I was wearing a blouse, and he just had me up against the wall, and the wall was cold. And I remember it happened all at once. The gym bag, I don't know where it went. I handed it to him, it was gone, and then his hands were on me and underneath my clothes. And and then he went down my skirt, but then up inside it, and he penetrated me with his fingers, whatever. And he was kissing me at the same time, and he was saying something to me. He said several things, and I can't remember everything he said. I remember a couple of things. I remember him saying first, before, like as he was doing it, "Do you want to go somewhere else?" And then him saying to me when I pulled away, he got finished doing what he was doing, and I kind of was pulled back, and he said, "Come on, man, I heard you liked me."
Mm-hmm.
And it's that phrase stayed with me because I kept thinking what I might have said, and I can't remember exactly if he said I thought or if I heard, but it's like he implied like that I had done this, like I don't know. And for me, it was like everything shattered in that moment, because I knew like we were alone, it was over, right? He wasn't trying to do anything more, but I looked up to him. He was like my father's age. He was this champion of women's rights in my eyes, and I couldn't believe it was happening. It seemed surreal. And I just felt sick, because when he pulled back, he looked annoyed, and he said something else to me that I don't want to say. And then he said, I must have looked shocked, and he grabbed me by the shoulders. I don't know how I looked, but I must have looked something, because he grabbed me by the shoulders and he said, "You're okay, you're fine, you're okay, you're fine." And then he walked away, and he went on with his day. And what I remember next is being in the Russell building, like where the big windows are, and the stairs by myself. And my body, I was shaking everywhere, and it was cold all of a sudden, and I don't know, I felt like I was shaking just everywhere, and I was trying to grasp what had just happened and what I should do or what I should say. But I knew it was bad, because he was so angry. Like when he left, like I could feel, how when someone's angry, they don't necessarily say anything. Like he smiles when he's angry, and you can just feel it emanating from him. Like, right. So then I went home, and I called my mom, because I didn't know who else to call, and she was wanting me to go make a police report like right then. My mom was very adamant that I do that, and very strong about me doing that. And I said no, and we had like an argument about it. I said, "Mom, you can't do that." And she had known about the other stuff and had encouraged me to document it, which I did, and go to the protocol about the sexual harassment. And then after this incident, I did follow her instructions and do that part. But I didn't talk about what happened, and I tried to bring it up to later, and she just wouldn't hear it. She like shut me down before I could even get there, and said, "I can't believe you're trying to bring things like this up." And she said, "How can I bring this to Ted Kaufman? He'll just think we're all on our periods."
Wow. And she could tell you were talking about something more than the harassment, or she was just saying that about the harassment?
I don't know. I can't project onto like what that conversation was, because I was starting to tell her. She didn't know. I didn't tell her. I started to try to go there, and she shut it down.
Right. Got it. Yeah.
Like, I don't want to hear this. Like, that's enough. Like, kind of basically letting me know, like, if I didn't like it, I could just go. And so it wasn't too long after when I would see Biden after that, he would just not look at me. He looked angry, like he would get this look on his face and like look. You know how someone walks by and instead of greeting you and smiling like they normally do, they won't look at you. Yeah. He was pissed. Right. So then the final interaction I had was a mandatory meeting where I had to be there, and he came up behind me and put his hand on my shoulder and then put his thumb or finger, I don't even know what, but up and down my neck in the back. I have thick hair in the back of my hair. And I remember I just froze because I didn't know what that meant. And it just was uncomfortable. And I, again, told my mom about it because it was just weird. And mom said, that's just power. He's trying to dominate you.
So this was after, because this was after the assault had happened? Wow.
Yeah. It was the last kind of time I ever really interacted, because they put me in a windowless office. I didn't have the one with a window anymore. I was cut off from staff. I was not supervising the interns anymore. I was literally, my job was to show up and just look for another job. I wasn't allowed to go to legislative hearings, nothing. So, but the chronology was that I was then looking for a job, and in June, I was volunteering for the RFK Memorial, the 25th anniversary. I did the VIP tent. And I was talking to a person in Kennedy's office who was trying to help me backdoor, trying to like get them to stop what they were doing. And anyway, technically, I think my Senate record goes till August, but I remember leaving before then. And I didn't have a job. I couldn't get a job. Once word got around unofficially about my trying to file a complaint, filling out a form and stuff, it's like no one on the Hill. Usually I would get, when I would send out resumes, I would get responses right away.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. You consider, reporting the harassment?
I did try to complain about the harassment internally, but I was going through protocol. You go to your supervisor first, then to Dennis Turner, then to Ted Kaufman. I was following the protocol, how you did it, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't do anything, right? And then it got worse, and then that happened. So then I went outside and tried, and there was this office set up, and I can't remember if it was in the Rayburn office building or if it was it seemed to me like it was in a congressional office building, not the Russell Senate, Longworth or Rayburn. And it was this little tiny office, and you go up, and there was literally a clipboard, and I filled out a form, and someone kind of was just at the window, but it was weird, and it wasn't very confidential, and it was just odd. So I filled out the form, and I know it existed. They took it, and then I don't know what happened to it. So I've tried to track that form down, and I was told it was probably returned to Biden's office. So it's an archival material.
Okay, so there's sexual harassment that you witness and experience, or you go through protocol. Then nothing happens. Then you have the incident in the alcove with Biden. You tell your mom, she encourages you to file a police report. You say, no, but I will do something external about the harassment, not the assault.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And I thought about trying to talk about it. I did. I tried. I just couldn't. Even now, it's so hard. And I don't. And I mean, I've worked as an advocate for domestic violence cases and help kids, and I help, whatever. But it's just, there was no framework back then. And
right.
To be really clear, my mom educated me after it happened that it was sexual assault. I felt like it was my fault, that I did to bring it on. And the reason after the whole serving the drinks thing happened, things got really tense for me. And it's my supervisor kept finding fault with my work. All of a sudden I was doing things wrong all of a sudden. And then she took me aside and sent in an assistant and said, we want you to wear different clothes. You need to button up more. You need to wear longer skirts. In other words, she said, don't look so sexy. She was really blamed about it. And she goes, try not to be so noticed. You're too noticeable. The other person was more awkward about it. She was just it's not coming from me, but they're telling you to wear longer skirts and button up more, and you're a little too provocative,
right.
Is the word to use. Right, whatever. So, and I was like, oh, this is weird. So I told my mom that, and she goes, that's retaliation. They're trying to retaliate. You need to document everything. And my mom was very adamant. And I wasn't And I was like, Mom, and my mom even said, you march in there and you tell them this is sexual harassment and you don't take it. I'm like, you don't march into Ted Kaufman's office and you don't do that. And I just wasn't comfortable. I said, I'll never be able to get a job on the Hill again. And it didn't matter because I couldn't anyway. So those are my memories of the kind of the overarching retaliation piece. But again, it started as a verbal complaint and then escalated to written. They did threaten to write me up about what I was wearing. And I was just wearing like, suits, like your average, like, skirt, blouse, sometimes a blazer, whatever. But I don't know, they were nice, I guess. I didn't have that many outfits. Like I wasn't, I had like just a basic wardrobe that I would interchange. But, it's now I look at it, it's laughable. They were just turning it around on me.
Right.
Because I was wearing like navy blue and black and pinstripe. Back then pinstripes were okay. I don't know why, but.
Nothing wrong with pinstripes.
So, yeah. To be really clear, I started out with just on my end, I like documented, my mom was like forcing me to and I was even keeping a journal at the time.
Which you don't have anymore, right?
No, I don't. I wish I did. I just never thought this would ever come up again. And there's many things from my youth that I don't have and I wish I did. But
yeah.
But she was kind of telling me what I needed to do. She predicted that they would retaliate, and she was absolutely right. I didn't think they would. For some reason, I was just in this, I just thought it would go away, after the drinks thing. I thought, well, when he gets the message, I'm not interested, or I'm not, one of those people that just wants to try to make contacts that way, it'll just go away. Yeah. But it didn't. It got worse, and they really took an attitude of, it was almost hostile. It was angry almost from upper level staff. I just wasn't cooperating the way they wanted me to.
Right.
So to be really clear, it was written. It was verbal, And then after the incident is when I went outside.
The assault incident.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
After the assault, I went outside, the sphere of the office for help. And that's when I sought out that little room that I filled out a form. It was just a form. And then didn't really know.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. That's really important. I covered a smaller portion of this interview in my prior video and gave different commentary. I'm going to finish reading this, and I'm going to repeat this. Her story, meaning Alexandra Tara Reade, or Tara Reade, her story is so detailed and emotional that it is extremely hard listening to her tell it to believe that she's not telling the truth. This is what I've already said before I read this article in my previous video. But some people have suggested that they do think Reade might be lying or delusional, and that her lack of credibility is sufficient grounds for burying her story. Amanda Marcotte, writing in Salon, dismisses the idea that those ignoring the story are doing so because they are uncomfortable elevating an allegation that can be politically devastating for Democrats. Instead, she says, actually it would be very good for Democrats because people would vote for Bernie Sanders and he'd become the president, crush Donald Trump. Instead, she says, they mean corporate elitist Democrats who would rather have Donald Trump than Bernie Sanders because they would profit, and Bernie Sanders will attack corruption in government and their corrupt people in government, so they could actually be held accountable for their many years of heinous or crimes against the American people and democracy. Anyway, instead, she says there are genuine reasons to doubt Tara, a lot of red flags, and therefore to not report on her story. An article in Jezebel by Emily Alford suggests that Reade's accusation has been improperly vetted, i.e. that there is not enough reason to trust her, and she should not be listened to until her account has been bolstered. If these perspectives are right, they provide a legitimate, non-political explanation for ignoring Reade. So is there anything to the argument that Tara Reade is not credible? No, I don't think so. I have talked to Tara Reade extensively myself, and she has been completely consistent and frank. Consistency is important. I have talked to her brother, who confirms that Tara told him about the assault at the time. I have also talked to her friend Sarah, a fellow Capitol Hill staffer Tara spoke to about the assault in 1993, as well as over the years afterward. The Intercept talked to both of them as well, and Reade's brother, Colin Moultrie. said, woefully, I did not encourage her to follow up. I wasn't one of her better advocates. I said, let it go, move on, guys are idiots. When I asked Sarah if the account Tara has given to the press is consistent with what she said in 1993, Sarah said that it was. She confirmed that Tara had called her on the phone shortly after the incident happened and was very distraught about it. Sarah says the news left her in absolute shock at the time. She added, I have not enjoyed knowing this about someone, Biden, who for 8 years was in the news as VP. Even in this campaign, every time I see him, I wasn't in the hallway, but I still look at him without thinking of that. She should have been safe. She should have never had anything close to this even happen. I also asked Sarah about a comment Tara's brother made to me. He said that the incident had changed Tara's personality, sapping her confidence. Sarah agreed, saying Tara began to second-guess herself afterwards. The effects of Biden's attack on Tara were severe and lasting. It's never left her, she said. What I wouldn't give to go back to time and to pull her out of that hallway, say, run, go, but no one can make time go back. This is more corroboration than Christine Blasey Ford had. She hadn't told anyone at the time of her assault, yet her accusation was front-page news. But I also think that the particular reasons Marcotte and Jezebel have for casting doubt on Tara Reade do not hold up, and I would like to go through all the current criticisms of Reade and show why they are so weak. In fact, I think they are totally indefensible. Those who make them are casting doubt on a victim for no good reason and suggesting that women who come forward should be disbelieved on spurious grounds. Ultimately, those who have criticized and ignored Tara Reade are doing serious damage to the Me Too movement by suggesting that women like Reade may well simply be delusional or lying, and until they can prove that they are not delusional or lying, their claims can be set aside. Salon's attack on Reade's credibility. Amanda Marcotte's Salon article is particularly insidious, and I want to carefully explain why, because it may not be obvious on a casual reading. Marcotte is an established feminist writer, and the article is presented as nothing more than a fair-minded assessment of Reade's claims, clarifying myths and facts, and setting the record straight. Salon hopes this story will offer clarity about what is and isn't true. Marcotte says that both Reade's critics and her supporters are mistaken, thereby positioning herself as a mere neutral arbiter of fact, debunking both pro- and anti-Reade talking points. The anti-Reade talking points that Marcotte debunks are obviously ludicrous. Marcotte magnanimously defends Reade against charges of being a woman who once appeared on Dr. Phil to say that Vladimir Putin was her boyfriend. She also says it's highly doubtful that Reade is a Russian agent because anyone working for Russian intelligence would have done a better job covering her tracks. But while Marcotte presents herself as being fair to Reade and as a feminist inclined to be sympathetic, one of her central conclusions is deeply hostile to Reade. She suggests that there is good reason not to listen to Reade because her accusation may well be political and has red flags. The central pro-Reade talking point she attacks is that Reade is credible enough to warrant her story being heard in the mainstream media. There's something quite ugly in the way Marcotte weighs Reade's allegation. Even though she talked to Reade, she does not give Tara space to tell her story in her own words. Instead, here are some excerpts from Marcotte's section on why the media hasn't covered the story. Reade's story of what happened during her tenure working for Biden has changed over time. Reade's April 2019 account of why she left Biden's office also conflicts with earlier things she has written before 2019. Reade lived under another name. She changed it for many years to escape an abusive husband and provided the paperwork demonstrating this to Salon, and her public statements about Biden were entirely positive. After making her 2019 allegations that Biden had touched her inappropriately, Reade spent months tweeting that story dozens of times at various figures, politicians, celebrities, media outlets, even Donald Trump. Marcotte chose to hyperlink this one, to no response. Under both her current and prior names, Reade has expressed public support for a variety of Democratic politicians in the past, ranging from Senator Cory Booker and Senator Elizabeth Warren to Tulsi Gabbard and Marianne Williamson. Then, over the past few months, Reade began heavily retweeting pro-Sanders accounts and regularly engaging with prominent Sanders supporters like Halper. It was during this time that Reade started to hint publicly that what had happened with Biden had been far more serious than her 2019 story detailed. Such hinting led, as Reade told Salon, which Halper confirmed, to an anonymous woman suggesting that Reade seek Halper out to tell her full story. When asked why her story had changed so much in the past year, Reade told Salon that she had been considered describing the assault to the original reporter from the Nevada County paper, but the way he asked the questions had shut me down. That reporter did not respond to Salon's request for comment. She also said she felt intimidated by social media attacks and threats in the aftermath of her original accusations and therefore stayed silent. The timeline shows that Reade's involvement in the entire world of Bernie fandom coincided with her escalation of accusations against Biden. To be clear, this does not mean she's lying, but taken along with the other discrepancies in Reade's accounts, which are also on their own not reasons to discredit her, it's enough to make publications take a slow and careful approach to amplifying this story. Now let's note, this passage undermines Reade in about a dozen small ways. Through subtle choices of what to present and how to frame things, Marcotte repeatedly makes the very serious charge that Tara Reade has changed her story so much in the past year. But this is an unfair and inaccurate way to characterize what has happened. Reade did not originally disclose the full nature of what happened to her. In April 2019, when Lucy Flores spoke out about Biden touching her inappropriately, Tara Reade came forward to confirm that Biden had done similar acts to her. Then later, Reade said that there was more that she had not previously disclosed, namely a serious sexual assault. To see why this is not properly characterized as changing her story, imagine if I asked you, how was your relationship with your employer, and you said it was rocky. He sometimes gave me funny looks and did something that made me uncomfortable, like patting me on the head. Then later you talked to someone else at more length. You admitted that there had been more than the employer had assaulted you. An unfair person trying to discredit you, a la Marquette, could characterize this as changing your story, but that's the kind of aggressively uncharitable framing that the lawyer for the employer would choose when cross-examining you, and why did you change your story, rather than the kind of framing we should use if we are trying, as Marcotte says she is, merely to get to the truth. Gradually opening up about the parts of the story that are the most difficult to tell is very different from altering it. The difference should be obvious, especially to someone who understands how survivors tell stories. The other piece of evidence for Marcotte's assertion that Reade has changed her story a lot is that Tara Reade once wrote a blog post in which she talked about leaving her DC job and does not say it was because Biden sexually assaulted her. Again, someone trying to be fair to Reade rather than trying to sow as many doubts as possible would show an understanding of the fact that a woman who's been sexually assaulted by a prominent politician might not necessarily post about it on her public blog, and might emphasize the other reasons she left Washington. This stuff is difficult to talk about, and an honest feminist writer would be taking great pain to help people understand why things that look like they might be changes in a story aren't necessarily changes at all, and might just reflect a growing level of comfort with being public about something very painful, something originally only disclosed to private friends and family. Professor Anthony Zenkis, an expert on sexual violence at the Columbia School of Social Work, shocked by Marcotte's doubting of Reade's sexual assault claims because she changed her story over time, explains in an op-ed why the apparent contradiction is no contradiction at all. In the sexual violence advocacy community, it is well understood that survivors take time to tell their full stories. At an advocacy agency where I was a director, a young girl who was sexually abused by a male relative told the police how he fondled her above her clothing. Months later, she spoke about the penetration. This is typical behavior for victims of trauma. Rarely does a story come out all at once. When Tara Reade joined other women in April of 2019 in speaking about how Biden put his hands on her and caressed her neck, she did not speak about the most horrific part of what happened. The response from supporters of Biden was swift. Reade was criticized, her story dismissed, and her character attacked. It is clear why she wavered on coming forward with the most brutal details of her rape. Marcotte, by failing to explain this, and instead using Tara's gradual willingness to share more as changing her story, is discouraging her audience from thinking about how real-world victims relate traumatic events. Professor Zenkis notes that Tara's story has not changed. Details have been included now that Reade said she wasn't comfortable including in the past. When I asked Tara's friend Sarah about Tara's willingness to come forward, she said that she had known Tara was not revealing everything, but said the decision was completely understandable to her. I didn't feel that it was my place when I spoke with reporters last year to say, well, if you think that's bad, I know even more. In response to criticism of Tara's timing, Sarah said, I've known this situation since 1993, and added that she had gradually discouraged Tara from coming forward because she didn't think Tara would be safe. And I know enough to know that when women do come forward, even other women go, really prove it. I need documentation. I just think we don't want to admit that people are capable of bad, gross things. She acknowledges that a lot of people who are watching Tara's media presence critically at the moment will probably wonder why is she jumping up and down. But she's been jumping up and down since it happened, noting that Tara immediately told Sarah, her mother, and her brother. There are countless other ways in which Marcotte sows doubt for no good reason. I'm gonna have to cut this article off because this video is unfortunately going to probably be cut off and made into two, and I don't have time to post both videos. I just want to say that you could still vote for Bernie Sanders, and that you should vote for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. You should do so safely.